our Unite for Her Facebook page. We are streaming live. Wonderful. We will make sure that we do that. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday of our first Ask the Experts of 2022. We're so happy you're here. We are hopping on for our monthly Ask the Experts series. I'll give a few moments for people just to log on to watch live. We always stream our Ask the Experts over Facebook. If you missed this or you have to hop off early, know that we keep these videos on our Facebook page, so you can always go back and re-listen. Today's discussion, I know we're going to cover really important information. There'll be a lot of wonderful sharing, so you'll likely want to go back and re-listen because we have some fantastic experts with us today. So, oh good, we have several people hopping on already. So before we bring in our guests, let me introduce myself. So my name is Erin Pellegrin, Senior Nutrition Manager with Unite for Her, and happy to be here to host our January Ask the Expert series. This is our monthly Q&A style educational series that we bring you. It's usually the last Thursday of every month. We've got some fun topics coming up the next few months, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So as you can tell, we are streaming live on Facebook. For those that are watching, know that you're welcome to ask questions and comments in the chat. Both I and our experts can see the chat come through, and so we'll be able to comment and answer your questions along the way. So know that we totally encourage live engagement with us. As you saw in our description for this month, our Ask the Experts, we will be defining and discussing metastatic breast cancer. So we'll be diving into some of the topics surrounding what it means to have metastatic breast cancer. We'll be touching on the medical side. We'll be touching a little bit on the patient side. We've got experts from both aspects of that world, and we're really excited to have them share their knowledge and resources with us. Our experts, I will get to their introduction, but just to share, we have Ricki Fairley with us and Dr. Monique Gary from Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, BBCA. So happy to have them. And as always, I like to share that our Ask the Experts is one of our digital education series. They are supported by our 2022 education sponsors, and today's presenting sponsor is Merck, and our supporting sponsor is Exact Sciences, and we are so thankful that they support us so we can continue to bring these series to you to talk about these really important topics. And as a reminder, every Thursday, the last Thursday of the month, we have our Ask the Experts. In February, we will be bringing in our beauty advisor, Jolene Hart. She'll be talking all about beauty for mothers and daughters. Really interesting topic, a lot of fun, and I'll remind us again at the end. So without further ado, let me read a little bio about our experts before we bring them on the screen and really dive into some of these questions about metastatic breast cancer. So first we have with us Ricki Fairley. She is the CEO and co-founder of Touch BBCA. As a stage 3A triple negative breast cancer survivor, thriver, Ricki's personal purpose, passion, mission, ministry, and blessing is to bring focus, attention, research, and action to eradicating Black breast cancer and supporting and coaching what she calls her breasties through their breast cancer experience. She founded and serves as co-host on The Doctor Is In, a live weekly web series on blackdoctor.org Facebook page. In addition, in partnership with the Breasties, she founded Breast Cancer United and serves on the board of trustees for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. So we're so excited to have her with us. In addition, we have Dr. Monique Gary, who is one of our physician partners from Grandview Hospital. So we know she has so much experience with metastatic breast cancer. She is the medical director of Grandview Hospital, the Penn Cancer Network Cancer Program, where she also serves as the director of the NAPBC Accredited Breast Program. During her tenure, the breast program achieved designation of Center of Excellence for Minimally Invasive Hidden Scar Techniques and Oncoplastic Breast Surgery. In addition, Dr. Gary founded and now directs the Cancer Genetics and Risk Assessment Program at Grandview Hospital. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on our guests, Dr. Gary, Ricki. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
Yeah, thanks for covering this important topic today. This is huge.
Yeah, this is huge. And I foresee a lot of engagement, a lot of questions. We'll cover as much as we can while we're here together. So let's jump right in and get to talking. So I think a great place to start is just defining what is metastatic breast cancer and really even talking about what is and what is it not. Dr. Gary, can you explain a little bit?
Absolutely. I find that this question comes up quite a bit when people read their pathology results. And so it's important to define what metastatic breast cancer is first and foremost. And metastatic breast cancer is defined as stage 4 breast cancer, meaning that cancer has left the breast and entered other parts of the body. So it's not just what we call locally advanced to the armpit, but it has then spread to other organs, lung, liver, bone, anywhere where breast cancer can go is where breast cancer can go for stage 4. So that's metastatic. It can also be what we call de novo, meaning it can be found metastatic at the time of diagnosis. So some women don't start with a stage 1, 2, or 3. Some women go directly to stage 4, and that's an important distinction as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that term. I think that that may be something that our community may hear, and they're not quite sure what that distinction means. So that de novo explanation, I really appreciate that.
Now, when we talk about what it is not, metastatic breast cancer, when a patient reads a pathology report, because we all get them on their portals now, and you may not get a chance to even speak to your doctor about it. And you may read something that says metastatic to one lymph node or cancer has metastasized. It's a different terminology than metastatic breast cancer. So
Yeah.
cancer by nature, once it invades or breaks out of the place where it started, and I love using that crescent roll analogy, the can of Pillsbury biscuits. When you break the seal and the dough starts to pop out, when that seal's broken, it's now invasive and it has the potential to spread. And when it spreads, even to one lymph node, that process of spreading is called metastasis. It does not mean, though, that a person has metastatic breast cancer. That means it's in other organs. So reading metastatic to a node doesn't mean you have a stage 4 diagnosis. Reading the word metastasis does not necessarily mean you have a stage 4 diagnosis.
Oh, that's really good. I'm glad you clarified because I can see how that can be really confusing when we start to see these similar words and it might be upsetting thinking that we're in a part of this journey or at a stage of diagnosis that may not be correct. I'm glad you clarified that.
I'll give you an example too. For me, I was diagnosed originally with stage 3A triple negative, but it was in my lymph nodes. So they took out 10 lymph nodes and they found cancer in 7 of them. And so even then I said, well, am I metastatic? And they said, no, you're not. But thank God I had a similar explanation to Mo. But then a year later, they found 5 spots on my chest wall. And my doctor, I remember my doctor saying, well, it's very serious now. I'm like, what does that mean? And so I remember talking to my chemo nurse saying, am I metastatic? And she's like, yes, you're now metastatic. And so I'm still here. They gave me 2 years to live. I'm still here 10 years later.
Wow.
I'm American, but I mean, still, even going through it, people don't give you the right explanation. I didn't know what was going on. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to define the word and what it really meant for me. And you're so scared of that word, right? But even a lot, we get so many calls from people that have no understanding of what the word means for them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's great to define it.
Is that something, Dr. Gary, that you advocate for in terms of asking that question? Am I metastatic? Okay, what does that mean? To provide some clarification, is that something that our community should be doing?
Absolutely. And it really goes back to one key thing that we're going to be talking a lot more about. I know Ricki and I have some videos coming out addressing what is the standard of care, right? Because the next question you're going to ask, as soon as a surgeon says or a doctor says you have breast cancer, you're going to say, well, where else is it? Where else could it be? And that workup, that process of imaging and PET scans and all those things, there's a pathway that we follow to help people understand, is my cancer metastatic? And so sometimes people want imaging that's not necessarily indicated or approved for the stage that they have. And so understanding what the standard of care is and why is really important. But it's a great question to ask your doctor, am I metastatic? What is my risk of metastatic disease, right? Because those are the questions that speak to what your therapy should be and how aggressive it should be.
Right.
whether or not you should undergo things like chemotherapy and radiation. What's the risk of it coming back and coming back someplace else? And then how can we know, and what should I be looking out for in the future? So those are great questions that anyone should be asking their doctor at the time of diagnosis, and even 6 months, a year later, every visit. How do we know? How are we checking? Give me some peace of mind. And the answers aren't always clear. And so it's really important for them to know what is the standard of care.
Yeah,
That's really good.
When I hit my 5-year mark, my oncologist said, "Okay, Ricki, you're done. See you, bye." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I had been getting scanned, every 6 months until then. And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean I'm not going to get a PET scan?" He's like, "Well, you don't need it anymore. Come back when you're symptomatic." I'm like, "What the hell does that mean? Come back when I'm symptomatic? I don't want to come back I don't want to be symptomatic." And
Right.
so now I still go annually. My doctor said, "Okay, if you want to come in, we'll we'll do a PET scan." So I go every year, but he has to write the order such that I have a symptom in order for my insurance to cover it.
Exactly.
So,
Wow.
right. So I have to say that he thinks he's suspicious of something in order for me to be able to get the PET scan.
Yeah.
But I still go in year 10, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be symptomatic. I don't want to find out. I mean, I want to know. I want to know. And,
That peace of mind for sure.
And
Yeah.
that's different. That is different than for people who have early stage disease, So I think that understanding that, because you could be watching this and say, "See, I want my PET scan every year," and you might have stage 0 breast cancer, and it's not indicated for you. So
right.
That's where you got to talk to your doctor about what is the standard of care, what is my risk of something else happening, and how can we safeguard against that? Because people hear numbers and they can be scary. You can have a 10% risk of recurrence, and you're thinking, "Oh God, there's 10%." But if somebody told you you had a 90% chance of winning the lottery, you'd play those numbers, right?
Right.
And so you have to
Yes,
look.
you would. That's right.
Yeah. You got to look at the inverse and put it in perspective,
Right.
and that's where that conversation and that partnership comes in with your doctor, especially for metastatic breast cancer, because many doctors are even just afraid to broach that conversation.
Right.
Especially surgeons. They kind of say, "Oh, metastatic, okay, you go across the hall, go see the medical oncologist. He's going to give you chemo or something, and good luck. You don't need a surgeon." And that's a really poor model of care, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and you've touched on standard of care several times, both of you. And so in terms of treatment for standard of care for metastatic breast cancer, how is it different from other stages? And we know that it's more difficult. Why is there this difficulty that comes with treating it?
You want to go first, Ricki?
You probably have a much more scientific answer than me, Mo. I'm not a doctor or a scientist.
Well, I think it is as difficult to treat as all of the different diagnoses and stages and subtypes of breast cancer themselves. Now, it's not to say that certain types of metastatic breast cancer are not more aggressive than others. We certainly know that triple negative metastatic breast cancer is a difficult and different disease than ER, PR positive or estrogen receptor positive. When we know that hormones are driving cancer to grow, we can first target those hormones. And so it's a myth that all people with metastatic breast cancer, one, are going to need chemotherapy and they're going to lose their hair and they're going to look sick. That is not necessarily the case. But we do know that we need to have a very tailored approach, because it isn't one size fits all for the treatment of metastatic breast cancer.
And I think the cancer just kind of outsmarts the drugs eventually. I think that, the more drugs you take, the shorter, the shorter they work. And so it's like finding the right therapy to address them. I think, though, just going back even to earlier statement, the recurrence rate for breast cancer for Black women is 39% higher than white women. And so that's pretty scary odds, right? And I think the numbers are that 8% of breast cancer in Black women is metastatic. Mm-hmm. And that's 28% higher than white women. And so we get, Black women get a different disease. It's pretty scary for us. And we, we want to have those scans. We want to be on top of it because of the severity of the disease for us. And then we also get triple negative breast cancer at 3 times the rate of white women. And that's wreaking havoc in our community. We're getting it younger with bigger tumors. And, it's not a good place to be. And we have way less treatment options. We now have 2 really good treatment options for the first time in years. And we just, in the last 2 years, we have, 2 drugs that we can now use, Keytruda from Merck. Thank God for it. It's working miracles on triple negative and Trodelvy. But thank God for those drugs. But until the last year and a half, we didn't have anything.
And triple
negative.
Ricki, I think it circles back to the point that, we really do need to partner with our doctors, especially if you have a metastatic diagnosis, because it is not a one size fits all, a one and done, take this for the next 5 years and you're good to go. Because like you said, cancer cells learn how to evade the mechanisms by which these drugs work. So drugs may target the cell cycle growth. It may target something else. And then the reason why cancer is such a tough disease to treat is because it's not just one disease. We target that estrogen receptor, but what if that cell learns how to hide that receptor and estrogen's no longer driving it to grow? Then what's our therapeutic target going to be? And so having a doctor who stays in that fight with you and who's always looking for new targets, who's sensitive to the fact that you might be in a higher risk population is really important, because we know that, when you look at the numbers, up to 30% of all breast cancers can become metastatic, right? Yes. So when you look at the sum total of people who are metastatic, they don't all start out at metastatic. They start out at stage 1, 2, 3. And so their doctors have to be very careful to make sure that they continue that follow-up and that same aggressive nature. When we start this process, we got to continue throughout that process, but especially as treatment is involved, because the cancer cells are very smart and they learn to live forever. It's a cell that makes a mistake that goes on forever. And in order to do that, it'll develop different tricks and tips, and it'll mutate. The cells mutate, which means the treatment has to change.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask if that was considered a mutation, and could there be such a dramatic mutation in that it could really change the type of cell that it is, moving from hormone receptor positive to triple negative? Is that something that is possible?
Absolutely. Cells can mutate to the point where they can become other types of organs even. We call that anaplastic cancer, when the cells are so unrecognizable, they don't even look like breast cells anymore under the microscope. Wow. And so these cancers can be really aggressive, and the treatment has to be equally aggressive and tailored. But if we don't look, if we don't repeat biopsies or do other tests to check and see, did this cancer mutate? Is that why it's not shrinking anymore on the liver or the PET scan? We got to ask those important questions, because, just because a person is not having symptoms doesn't mean that something isn't happening once you're metastatic. So we got to stay on top of it.
Yeah, we see a lot of conversion to triple negative, right? Mm-hmm. As we take different drugs and stuff. So yes, for sure.
Wow. Going back a little bit, just to touch on your explanation of de novo metastatic breast cancer, and in terms of how that may be treated, is that something that could be different on its own as well, if, right off the bat, someone has that stage 4 diagnosis?
It is. And I think that we're still trying to learn whether or not people who are diagnosed with de novo breast cancer could potentially benefit from surgery up front, because you think, okay, if it's spread beyond the breast, then it's not a surgical issue anymore. And there's a clinical trial that looked at that at ASCO just last year. And I think that we're still collecting that data. And it may be that surgery can improve the quality of life, but might not necessarily result in what we call disease-free progression. So cancer can still progress, because once it's become systemic, the treatment should be systemic. So doing a local treatment like a surgery might not be as helpful, but I think that we're still learning that, and we have to be on a case-by-case basis. We can't just assume that because you've got metastatic, you will no longer need surgery. There are many patients for whom their metastatic disease goes away, and then we can do their breast surgery. We can remove those tumors. We can do things for the ovaries and stop the driving of estrogen. So surgery is still in the mix, and if you have metastatic breast cancer, you need to make sure that surgeon is still part of your team and checking in, even though they may not be operating on you, they're still part of that team.
And I think there's something psychological there too, Mo. Do I want to cut the cancer off my body? If I cut my breasts off, maybe something will go away, or so I think there's this debate over should I keep my breast because it's one less thing to have to medicate or deal with, right? Yeah. And at least I can have my breasts, or will I feel better if I think I'm doing something to get the cancer out, which may or may not be true anyway. So
it's true, but I tell patients my job is not to save your breast, it's to save your life.
Right.
And if what I can do isn't going to save your life, then guess what? I don't need to be operating on you. And that's just the God's honest truth. That surgery can help, then that's, I stand ready to do that. But I don't want to put a person who already has this burden of diagnosis through something else just to make me feel better, or to do the thing that I can do, because we're hammer looking for a nail, in the sense that we like to use the modalities that we know. I'm trained to do this. I want to help, but if it's not going to help, I shouldn't do it. And so having that conversation with patients is super important.
Right.
Yeah. And we're hearing so many questions from both of you about what we should be asking our physicians, those check boxes of going down the line and really covering all our bases. So I love that you're sharing, ask about this. Is this appropriate? I think we're getting a lot of good guidance here.
I would also say, Erin, and I love Mo dearly, and I think the one thing that I see from her is, and it's kind of made me have my own definition of health equity. When she meets a new patient, she says, "I will treat you like I treat my family," and unless you have a doctor that will do that for you, you need to call Mo, or you need to really have that kind of relationship with your doctor. To me, that's what the epitome of health equity is, having the doctor say, "This is how I would treat you, my mother, my sister, my daughter, my loved one," right? And that's so important. So, the doctor will say, "Oh, do you want to do this treatment, or you could do this treatment, or you could do this clinical trial?" Well, guess what? What would you recommend for your family member? What do you see as my best situation if you loved me as a person?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to demand that kind of care from our doctors. And if they don't,
absolutely.
Ricki, it brings up a really good point, though, because I think that by that same token, that doctor should also be asking for their family member, are there trials that my loved one can participate in? And it should be an early consideration and not a late consideration, right? Clinical trials are not just for when we've exhausted every other option. And many physicians will present it to a patient as such. And it can be the first option, and it can be a great first option for patients at many stages, not just at stage 4. I think the other part is, it's not just about treating a tumor. There's a person attached to that diagnosis. And so what are the other treatments that can help? What are the other therapies and other members of that care team that can help my loved one have a great quality of life and get through some of these treatments? And so looking at it not just from the disease perspective, and when a doctor treats a patient like family, if I'm the family member, I'm not just asking about surgery and chemo and radiation. I'm asking about palliative care. I'm asking about nutrition. I'm asking about a lot of different things that I know improve the quality of people's lives.
Yeah. I would say, there's actually a lot of people attached to that tumor, not just the patient, but all the people that you impact in your life. And that's one of the things that's so great about Unite for Her, because you guys are addressing all of these things for people, and you're giving them all these palliative care options and things to, make their life better. So
we talk about that palliative care.
Yeah.
I would love, I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of anxiety that I know that we hear when that word is brought up, what we think it means, what we think it includes. I would love that. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Ricki, what did you think palliative care was before you knew what you knew and before you became an advocate?
Before I knew, I thought it was hospice. I thought you were going to die.
Right. And when people say palliative care, they hear hospice, and it is not the same thing, not even close. No. Palliative services are services to help improve the quality of life, and it can happen at any stage. I've had patients with early stage breast cancer and chronic pain, and maybe they have other mobility issues or something, and they need a palliative care consult. Just so they can get through their stage 1 or 2 treatment. It's not end of life care at all. It's the services that help keep a person in their home so that their home is safe. It's services that help with pain, services that help you to be able to get through things like chemotherapy and radiation. So palliative care is a huge umbrella that does not necessarily mean end of life care, which is what hospice essentially means.
Well, you know what the confusing words are? Quality of life. When you hear those words, quality of life, it sounds like you're dying. I mean, I think those words in itself invoke this fear of well, what do you mean quality of life? Like, what did I have before? Like, I mean, I think there's a stigma about those words that kind of signify that you're dying.
That sounds like something we can do some education around. Because when I talk to people,
I love that,
their quality of life before breast cancer, right? So we, even for surgically treatable, for treatable breast cancers, I don't want to say curable breast cancers, but for early stage disease, your quality of life before your diagnosis might not have been great. You might not have been eating well, sleeping well. You might not have loved your body before, and then you get breast cancer and put a pink tutu on, tell you to go, walk down the street
Right.
and celebrate life. You didn't love your body before
Right.
breast cancer. So
Right.
quality of life can happen, and it happens to all of us. And I think determining what that quality of life is and making sure that you have the resources to make that quality of life the best that it can be is where we should all be aiming. And so there's some education that we can definitely do surrounding that. But one of the things I will say, and piggybacking off of what you said, is that Unite for Her, for my patients, not just metastatic, but for all my breast cancer patients, provides a greater quality of life and addresses the things that I don't get to address in a 30-minute or a 1 hour or even a 15-minute office visit, because there's so many other things that happen after the typical traditional therapies that happen to our bodies, to our minds, to our spirit. Yeah. That need to be addressed. And this is where programs like this really come into play to provide that palliative aspect without even calling it palliative care, right? We call it a care box, right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
How about changing the words quality of life to living your best life?
I love that. I love that.
Your best life in whatever situation you're in, but you're living your best life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or even just teaching people to choose quality. We choose quality clothes. We choose quality food. Choose a quality life.
Yeah.
And somebody put in the chat about financial toxicity, and they're absolutely right, because cancer really, it robs you of not just your peace of mind, but it robs you of your financial options, in the sense that you may not be able to work. And there is a financial piece associated with breast cancer treatment in general, but also with stage 4, circling back to metastatic patients, there is a financial burden that is it's necessary for us to talk about, but also necessary for us to advocate around and to do some interventions. So there's another area for people who are watching. If you're trying to figure out what to do, how to get involved, where to advocate, what questions to ask your legislation, it's around funding for metastatic breast cancer. Stage 4 deserves more. It's around research. It's around the financial toxicities of all these drugs, because if my patient has to choose between their mortgage or their kids' tuition or their chemotherapy, what kind of quality of life is that, right?
For food, yeah. And actually, I came into a situation with a patient not too long ago that I felt like she needed some palliative care. She's metastatic, and so I called this palliative care center in Maryland, which there is not good palliative care in the state of Maryland. I did learn that, and there's like one center that delivers it around the DC metro area. And after making a lot of calls, and what I found was, I needed permission from her doctor. So then I called the oncologist's office to get the permission. And their oncologist said, "Oh my gosh, don't do that, because she's on Medicare." And when you're on Medicare in the state of Maryland, I don't know if this is for every state, they view palliative care as hospice. And if she were to do that, she wouldn't be able to stay on treatment.
That's terrible.
So isn't that ridiculous? So because the rule for how it's paid for, she would have to make a choice. Well, so of course she didn't go to get palliative care, which is crazy, because she doesn't want to go in hospice. She just wants to get some pain management and to get some services.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's we're going to do some work on that, actually, Mo, and have our interns kind of dig into what's going on in all the states, because that's just crazy and ridiculous.
It's an area for advocacy in legislation for sure. And, Erin, circling back, I think, to talking about how these things happen, the social determinants of health, right? Structural systems that are in place that make it more difficult for people to get a diagnosis, to get screening, right? So we know that in areas that have been hit hard by COVID, right, where there's socioeconomic differences, more rural areas, COVID-19 has added an entire layer onto the disparities that exist and the disproportionate screening. And so I think that somebody asked in a question, is there a financial piece that contributes to advanced cancer? Yes, because if people can't work to get their screenings, colonoscopies, for example, if they can't get to a center that has mammograms, or they're not offered the top of the line 3D mammogram instead of the 2D mammogram, or if they don't have insurance, if they don't have access, then their cancers are more likely to be diagnosed at a later stage. So it's definitely not in a vacuum that people are diagnosed with later stage, more advanced disease. And we have a lot of work to do surrounding that to alleviate some of those contributors. It's not just about, whether or not a woman breastfed or not, or it's not just about, whether or not she had children or she did hormone replacement therapy. You didn't cause this. but we can do better to help improve the social determinants of health as well that can weigh into some of those outcomes. And then there's the science part that people don't like to acknowledge, but we at Touch acknowledge that the science is a huge black box. And more for metastatic than anyone, but for Black women especially, it's a huge black box that we can't be afraid to open.
We can't have to open that box. We have to get more science for Black women.
Yeah. And would you recommend, even looking at clinical trials and asking the question, is that something that someone at any point of diagnosis or at the metastatic stage should be asking from the get-go as well? Am I appropriate for a clinical trial first? Is there something that we can consider down the line? Is that part of that initial conversation as well?
It should be. I think Mo alluded to this earlier. We did a bunch of research last year with Black breasties, and we learned that we already knew, kind of validated that there's so much earned medical mistrust in our system. There's a huge fear about trials, but really there's a lack of understanding of how a trial works, what standard of care is. That guess what? In cancer research, there is no sugar pill. We hear that a lot. Well, I'm going to get the sugar pill and die. Well,
it breaks my heart when I hear that. Yeah.
Too much from breasties, right? And breasties are saying that to other breasties, which is not good. So we actually just launched yesterday a campaign to educate on clinical trials. I'm so proud of it. It's called When We Trial, and we have a ton of information on our brand new website called whenwetrial.org.
Okay.
And trying to kind of talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Talk to me talk to me in my terms. Help me understand all these concepts in a way that's not the 5-minute conversation with the doctor. It's not the what you go read on WebMD, right? We try to kind of break it down to simple, understandable English. So here's what's going on. Here's what you need to do, and here's what can help you, because we need to educate about it. And frankly, you need to know about a clinical trial and what it is before you really need a trial, right?
Well, and Ricki, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Can you explain in your words or how you would share what is a clinical trial? So for those that are watching and questioning, I don't really know I thought there was a sugar pill. Can you give us a really good general explanation of what is a clinical trial?
How about if I give my layman's one and then I'll let Mel clean it up?
Yes, I love it.
I don't know if I can clean it up, but we'll do the best we can. I think we're not doing a great job of it, which is why we're here. So, yeah.
I know. So I think what we need to know is that it's really, and my best example is, that Advil you took last week? Guess what? It was in a clinical trial. That Tylenol you gave your baby, everything on the market that you put in your body is in a clinical trial, right? So, and they're all different, but for cancer drugs, there is no sugar pill. There is no placebo. What you're given is standard of care. So what you receive is a drug that's currently available and safe on the market, or potentially a new drug, right? That they're trying to learn about. So you're never going to be without nothing. You're always going to be with care, right? So you're either going to get the standard of care that exists already. There's a lot of drugs on the market, or something that could be new and different and provide better results. You also are going to get better care because the doctors are all over you. You get more scans, more attention, and people are watching over you more closely. And frankly, because we don't have a lot of data for Black women even with the standard of care drugs, we went digging into the drugs that were made in the 80s and 90s, and we can't really find traces of Black women in those clinical trials. So guess what? Those drugs that you take anyway have never been tested on Black bodies. So when I did my routine of TAC and carboplatin and gemcitabine, it was a clinical trial in my body already. I was doing a clinical trial in my own body, right? Yeah. So because we don't have data on how these drugs actually performed with Black women. So just understanding that this is just another way of looking at life, and giving you life. You're choosing life by choosing something that could be new and different. And people in trials have better outcomes because they're given more attention. And frankly, if the trial drug isn't working for you, they automatically put you on a different drug, right? You're not going to sit there with bad results. They're going to say, okay, this isn't working for you. Let's try something else. Let's go back to the standard of care drug. So, and I think close and attentive.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I think the thing to point out, Ricki, is that most drug trials now are not standard of care or something else. They're standard of care or standard of care plus something else. Because we know that the standard of care has limitations, that the tumors may evade those mechanisms, that, we see some response, but not a complete response. Otherwise, we'd have a cure already, right? So you have standard of care or standard of care plus something else.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for people to understand that in clinical trials, in drug trials, many times you're getting an extra drug in addition to that standard of care, so that you're not such a guinea pig, like, well, that's not working, go back to the standard. That's not working, go back. No, the standard's always working. And it's
right.
doing the best that it can.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to augment that response.
Right.
So that's an important distinction for drug trials. I think it's important for people to know that clinical trials are not always drug trials. We have clinical trials looking at whether or not cold cap therapy works, whether or not acupuncture works, whether or not exercise works, meditation, food, nutrition. There are all types of trials that look for what can improve people's lives through this experience, what can enhance their recovery, the drug delivery, how they metabolize the drugs, how they feel on chemotherapy. Can we get them off sooner? Can we improve the care? And that is not making yourself a guinea pig, right? That's not making yourself a slave to science. It's taking what you're going through, right? It's taking the poo and making fertilizer out of it, right? So something beautiful can grow. And I think that's a really important thing that people should be thinking about as they go through their cancer journey and try to make sense of why this happened to them and what can they do as a result of this. You know, you can share. The most important thing you can share is what's happening to you to help somebody else.
Especially when you're talking about immunotherapy too, because that's in combination with the therapy. One of the things that we learned recently that Merck is doing that's so phenomenal is actually working with other pharma companies to combine Keytruda with other drugs, and especially in the triple negative space, which is, I so love that. I so love that pharma companies are working together. But there's a trial now for Keytruda and Trodelvy, the only two triple negative drugs that we have for metastatic. And so they're testing the combination of those now, which is huge to me. It's like so amazing that they can, work together to get a better solution for people with that disease. So also to Mo's point earlier, I'm in 2 trials right now that are behavioral. One is to measure the impact of stress on Black women survivors, and the other is to measure the chemicals that are in my environment. And so I had to wear a bracelet for 2 weeks, one to measure the stuff that's on my body that I take, like lotions and soaps and creams, and then one to measure like the cleaning products in my house. And so because I'm so serious about advancing the science for Black women, I want to walk the talk. And so I will sign up for a trial in a heartbeat because I want to make science better for all of us, And
it's good to know, number one, I'm like hearing so much. So it's good to know that, number one, you can be on more than one trial at once. Of course, if there's no sort of contraindications. I love that we just learned that. Number two, Ricki, you explain the disparities that we see in the Black community. And so also what I'm hearing is, science and clinical trials are looking at how can treatment be different for a Black woman, and really looking into how does their body respond, and how we need to consider that strongly when we're thinking of how can we make this the most effective thing. I love that there's trials going on for that as well.
Yeah, we need more science. Our mortality rate is 41% higher than white women. So, so it's a different battle that we're fighting. But I think everybody needs. I don't want anyone to die of breast cancer. I want to fix it. I work for my 3 granddaughters, and Bella's 4. She's going to get boobs in about 10 years. So I got 10 years to get this done. So she's my purpose, and that's what I work for. But we have, there's so many opportunities though for us to all work towards science and ask our doctors. And frankly, doctors aren't necessarily asking trials until they see it as a last resort. It's not a last resort. It's something you should consider upfront, especially when you have triple negative or some of these advanced cancers and metastatic cancer. Like, advance the science if you can, and help yourself and help your families. Like if do it for your daughters.
I want to bring this back around too, Ricki, as we talk about metastatic and how, who's on your care team? How should you craft a life of support so that you can continue to have a great quality of life? I'm going to call it quality of life, but joy in your life and purpose in your life.
Live your best.
Be able to live your best life. Exactly.
Live your best.
But also your doctor should be talking to you about things that medical professionals don't always like to talk about. Like somebody in the comment mentioned medical marijuana. Someone else mentioned in the comments, narcotics and use of narcotics and the fear surrounding that, the fear of prescribing that. And so I really challenge people watching, if you are an advocate, family member, if you're facing metastatic breast cancer, to start to ask your physicians about these things. And if they shy away from those topics, don't be afraid to do that research, and know that for her is a great resource for you for those things also, because where the data and the science may not have caught up yet, because, you know, we're slow to look at natural and holistic things because there's so many interactions in the body, and because the science has extracted what's natural and amplified it into a Tylenol, right? And Tylenol is based on something. Aspirin is based on something that grows in nature, but we've been able to pare it down and extract it and amplify its effects so that you don't have to take 6 months of something to cure a headache. So the medicine it's a good thing, but there are adjuvant and alternative, and I'll say complementary adjuncts to care that especially metastatic patients should be asking about as they look for ways to deal with nausea, sleeplessness, anxiety, stress, pain, all those sorts of things. And so your team has to address the whole person. And that is a key take home for metastatic patients and for all cancer patients. But metastatic for sure, you need a care team that's addressing every aspect of your care.
We do.
Yeah. And really thinking of that from the get-go. I love that you pointed that out, that you're not just having this discussion about medicine, but you're also talking about what else can I do? You know, there is a whole umbrella of treatment that goes into this, both medication and then lifestyle and medical marijuana, you know, all of these different avenues a person can take. I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and don't forget that Unite for Her is part of that care team, you know, especially for our metastatic patients get some services every single month. Right. And so, and they look forward to it. They give me feedback. We talk about it.
Yeah. They love it.
How it just, it improves the quality of their life and their ability to stay in treatment. And so I think it's really important, because it's not just about the treatment that's working. It's everything else that's working to keep that person whole, to stay on treatment. And so that's something that we definitely want to encourage people to explore. You know, if you have family members and you're watching, or if you have metastatic breast cancer, it's not just about the drugs. It's about you, the person, your family, your life.
The whole. Yep.
And I think that you guys do such a good job. The things in the box are so thoughtful, that there's so much thought that goes into every item, every product, every service that you deliver. That's such a great gift, because you can tell that you're thinking about the mindset of this metastatic cancer patient and what they really need. And so that's a great, you know, that diligence is really, really helpful to our patients.
Thank you. And we try to be thoughtful about that very thing.
Yeah.
And even just the extension of the passport, the continuous renewal, because we recognize this is a long journey. You know, treatment will continue in some way, shape, or form. Needs will change. How they feel will change. And we want to be able to have services that will change along with them. That at any given point, if they need something, they have access to it through us, or we can help them get in contact with someone else that can help them. We can be that resource as well with all of our connections.
Sure.
Right. I think there's a question in the comments, Mo, that about Keytruda, asking, you know, how does it work? And, you know, to me, that's something that the doctor should be explaining to a patient. Yeah. If you're taking a drug, you should know what's going on and how it works, and you should be able to, and that's another question to ask. So like, how is this therapy going to work in my body? What is the chemistry? Or like, you know, break it down to me so I can understand it. But tell me what's supposed to be happening now that's going to get rid of my cancer. And I think it's okay to ask those questions and say, hold on, I don't understand why you're giving me this drug. What is it going to do for me? And how's it going to be different from what I already took last week or last year or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. Okay. And much of what we learn about these drugs, we learn from other cancers. So to the question about Keytruda, right, talk to your doctor. How often should I be getting screened and imaged and things like that? But Keytruda in particular is a monoclonal antibody. So it targets a part of the cell, and the part that it targets is called a PD-1 receptor. It blocks this receptor, and we learned about it from actually lung cancer. So when you ask about where does this drug work, and does it only work on certain cells, it can work on other cells and other organs as well, and it can target that throughout the body, and so, you know, these drugs are specific for a certain type of cell that exists wherever it exists in the body. The drug will target it there. So that's a great question to ask your doctor. How does this drug work? And explain it to me like I'm in junior high. because
Right.
we start getting off on a tangent about receptors and ligands and other things and mechanisms of action, and you lose people. And so
Right.
make sure your doctor can translate for you and say, okay, now if I were your daughter and you were explaining this to a little girl who had cancer, how would you explain it? And
Right.
watch the tone
Exactly.
soften and watch the
Exactly.
difference.
Or how
And
would
I
you explain
think,
it to your daughter, to your
Mhm.
mom? Like talk
right.
to me, and how you would talk to your family, you know?
Well,
Um,
and I think that's important, Ricki, as you said, like we want to gain trust and respect with our medical professionals, and being able to communicate properly and answer those questions, I think is part of building that trust in our team so that we know that they will take the time to answer
yes.
our questions and
Yes.
explain thoroughly so that we have a good understanding of what's going in our body, what's the process, what's the plan.
Right. Somebody
Yeah.
asked about my or When We Trial website. I can't figure out how to put it in the chat, but it's whenwetrial.org. I can't figure out how to do the chat
I'll
for
put it
mine.
in the chat for you. Yep. I'll put that in
Whenwetrial.org.
the chat.
And then
Yep.
also yesterday, I was on a call and I met a gentleman who had small cell lung cancer, and he took Keytruda, which is what it was designed for, and he was cancer free in 8 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of results they have seen with that drug, and now they're introducing it in breast cancer, and I think it's a great thing to ask your doctor about, you know. So
Yeah.
just
I think another good question that we get are about tumor markers. Somebody asked about blood tests for breast
yeah,
cancer
yeah,
tumor markers. And, I think it's important for people to know that we're still learning the science surrounding tumor markers in the blood, and that different cancers can elevate those tumor markers. And we don't have a single one for breast cancer yet, like we do for colon, the CEA, which is more specific for colon. It can be elevated in breast cancer too.
yeah.
PSA, the prostate one's very specific for prostate. The ovarian CA125 is pretty specific for ovarian, but breast cancer does not have a single blood test that we can detect. And some doctors will order a panel of tumor markers, but they're very difficult to interpret. And so that's a very personal conversation to have with your doctor, because there's no magic bullet that says if this blood test is elevated, your breast cancer is recurring. We don't have that science yet. So
Yeah,
we
we
got
don't.
some work to do there.
Yeah. Ness Smith asked a question about to me, asking like, how do I live with 10 years? So I do want to explain that I'm NED, that after I did my second round of chemo and, double mastectomy, chemo, radiation, and then more chemo, I'm NED now. And I'm a miracle. I don't really know how it happened. I think God left me here to do this work, which is why I've been an advocate ever since. So I would just say, live your best life and do everything you can, get the best care you can, and live every day. I do think I made some significant life changes. I really quit my life and started a new one. I divorced my husband of 30 years. Whoops. I had to get rid of all the cancers in my life, not just the one in my body. I sold my big house in the suburbs and I moved to the beach. And I had to learn that my peace is non-negotiable, and so is yours. And I will walk out of a room, see you bye, before I even begin to feel any kind of stress in my life. And I think you have to just make the changes you have to make to live your best life. So
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, Ricki. And I think this is a really lovely way to sort of wrap up this conversation. But when we think of a metastatic breast cancer diagnosis, there may be some doom and gloom or something that comes along with it. But there has definitely been strides and hope that the science that our integrative community has made. And so can you explain, what are those moments of hope that we have now? What else can we do? Where can we lean into so that we can continue living and thriving and having a wonderful quality of life?
live your best life, love your family, get lots of support, surround yourself with joy, surround yourself with the best care you can get, and surround yourself with joy, and find your peace. And thank you, Val, for putting the website in the chat.
I think that's good advice, because the tumor is unpredictable by very definition, and it robs you of your peace of mind, even when a therapy is working, because you're wondering how long is it going to work before it doesn't work again.
Right.
And so much of the breast cancer journey, especially for our metastatic breasties, is surrounding making sure that you are giving yourself the tools you need to eat good food, to get good rest, to manage your stress. Like, those are the things that we can control more than what's happening even in our own bodies sometimes.
Right. Right.
It's how we interpret those things and how we're able to keep our spirits raised, keep focused on moving forward with our therapies, or on living the best life that we have with whatever time that we have. I think there's an important component that we didn't really address today that we can't ignore, which is when to stop therapies and
When to
treatments.
stop. Yeah.
Right. And to do so with dignity and to partner with your doctors. And it just because you stop a therapy doesn't mean you couldn't decide to go back on one. And so figuring out what's the best thing for you, having peace of mind about those decisions as best as you can, is a really important part of that metastatic journey that doctors don't like to talk about. And it's important to talk about. But I think the hope and the positivity that comes away from this is in knowing that there are organizations that are out there looking to support this, that we will never stop researching for it, that there is more funding now than ever before for metastatic breast cancer, for Black breast cancer, for quality of life issues, for palliation. I think that we're seeing an explosion because of COVID. We're seeing an explosion of the need for services, and therefore the resources are going to start pouring in order to give people better quality of life and better and longer lives. And what you can do, start talking to, challenging your doctors, asking questions. These questions people are asking in the chat about their drugs, they got to ask their doctor. Don't be afraid to ask these questions and get good answers. Partner with your physicians, your care team, seek out second opinions. We can even do it virtually now. But this is an era of explosion of knowledge and science and compassion for patients. And the focus is on more than ever before, mind, body, and spirit. And that's something we haven't seen really in cancer care. It's always been separate. What's going on in your mind and your body, and your spirit really takes a back seat, right? But not anymore.
Oh, no. Spirit. I know that's why I'm here. My
mind,
spirit,
body, spirit.
Here. Yep.
Yeah.
I would say fight like a girl. Fight like a girl, And you know what? Also, you guys, you often need people to talk to. We answer the phone 24/7. You come, go to our website, touchbbca.org. You can get my phone number. You can call, text, whatever. If we don't answer right there, we'll call you right back. We have lots of great breasties that will help us answer. Thank you, Valerie, for doing that all the time. So we are always here for people, here for you. That's what we do. Breasty Love. It's a club you don't want to really be in, but once you're in it, we give unconditional love. And I will blow up Dr. Mo's phone at 4 a.m. when I get a question I can't answer and say, I need this answer about this person.
And we do the best we can. I'm a surgeon. I'm not a medical oncologist. I don't prescribe these drugs on a regular basis. And so I try to answer the questions as best as I can. But I think that it is just really important to partner with and challenge your doctors and to reach out to your care team and get those second opinions. If people have questions or want to reach me, I'm Dr. Monique Gary on all social media outlets, Dr. Monique Gary. And Ricki knows how to find me. So if you find her, she'll find me.
Yeah.
And we're for the answers to the questions. Because like I said, I don't prescribe all the drugs. I don't want to give, treatment advice here during this webinar. And I know people are looking for answers, and we're going to work to find you those answers. That I can promise you. I might not be able to answer personally, but we're going to find the doctors.
We'll find the answers. We'll find a doctor. Yeah. And my email is Ricki at touchbbca.org. Our website, touchbbca.org, and we're here, and whenwetrial.org. So call us, text us, tweet us. We're here.
We love it. Oh, thank you so much. I think that just sort of message of hope and information, and it just it moves us forward. It gives us all hope. I think it motivates us to keep working and asking and seeking and trying and learning. And it's nice to know that we have experts like you, part of our community, part of, side by side with our women and men among our community. So we are so grateful to having you here with us. And I can see all the thanks coming through the chat that everyone here, I'm sure everyone that watches in the future is just as appreciative. So thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting this. Thanks for
hosting us. Yeah.
Thanks for all that you do. We appreciate it so much. Unite for Her. Thank you for all that you do.
Oh, we love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So just to finish up, thank you so much again to Dr. Gary and to Ricki for joining us for hopefully what will be a first of many discussions around metastatic breast cancer and different avenues. I know we've got some ideas just from what we chatted about today. Thank you to everyone that hopped on and questions. Know that this video will stay living in our Facebook video library, so you can always go back and rewatch. We'll be sure to connect the information or add the information to this so that you can connect with Touch BBCA or with Dr. Gary on your own, but we are so thankful to have them part of our community. As always, we want to thank our education sponsors that allow us to bring these topics to you. So again, our presenting sponsor, Merck, thank you so much. And our supporting sponsor, Exact Sciences, for driving us forward and continuing these important topics. And as always, stay safe. Hopefully we will see you in February for our discussion with Jolene Hart around beauty for mothers and daughters. But until then, have a wonderful afternoon, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.